I've heard and seen your music described by many people as many different things. How do you define it?
I would kind of define it as improvisational music that's kind of influenced by, I don't know, I would define it as jazz. Make it easy for
You had a love of jazz from 11 or 12. I mean, for someone so young, it's maybe not a natural home musically. What drew you to it?
Well, I'm a second generation musician, so it was like kind of always in my life. My dad was always playing jazz for me, and then I had a cousin that was like my older brother's best friend, and he got into jazz, and like you look up to someone, and when I started playing music, he gave me this Art Blakey, Lee Morgan mixtape, and that was like when he was into it. Then I was like, oh, okay, this is something that's cool. And then I started to like listen to my dad's records, and like I started noticing all these samples of hip hop albums I was into, like, and it was one of those things where it just kind of like, when I discovered it, it was like I had been hearing it all my life, but I was kind of rejecting it. And then like when I discovered it for myself, it was like, oh man.
Because where you grew up might have been, more traditionally hip hop, rap.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that when I got into jazz, I kind of sucked all my friends into it too. So there was like this little contingency of, third grade kids, fourth grade kids at 74th Street Elementary that were in the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, And
how did that go down with the rest of the kids? Because as at that stage, maybe for that group of kids, it wouldn't have been seen as cool.
It was because at that point in history, like, that was like the beginnings of the kind of push to kind of pull arts out of the school. And so there were no instruments in my elementary school. And so what you got to play was like a recorder. And while everyone else had a recorder, I had a clarinet. And it just, I don't know, everybody thought it was cool. And I was playing jazz, but I used to play like little Boyz II Men songs and Jodeci songs. And I would play, the hooks to some of like NWA songs. I was just like playing music, and I could play music and I could hear it, and I had an instrument. And I think the kids, people in my community, they loved music. And so just kind of being tapped in the way I was, I think that the other kids looked at it as something that was cool.
You describe a school, where they had no instruments apart from recorders. How lucky were you to have access to music?
Yeah, very lucky. Very fortunate for me to, have a parent that kept musical instruments and books and records, and, I was, he'd take me to concerts. My dad took me to concerts, and, he took me to go play at my uncle's church, and I had someone who understood the value of music and the value of kind of understanding it. Because I feel like music is such a very human activity. It's something that really is in the core of all people. And it's kind of one of the real great connections that we have amongst each other.
And what is the value of music,
it's
particularly now?
I feel like it connects people, and I feel like sometimes we can feel so disconnected. Even though, with technology now, it seems like we're always tethered to one another, we're not always connected to one another. And so music, you go into a concert and you're surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people, and as soon as the sound comes in, you have a connection with all these people that you don't even know. And there's this kind of feeling of empathy and togetherness that music is unique in that sense, that it brings people together in that way.
A few years ago, there was a survey which suggested jazz was one of the least popular genres in the US. You're credited as being one of the musicians who has made jazz cool again.
Music is kind of intertwined. And so the word jazz, like I was saying before, like hip hop is jazz. So is funk, so is rock and roll, so is R&B, so is the blues. All those musics are one. They're just different facets of the same thing, So like when you think about jazz, what you're thinking about is like highly improvised, kind of very expressive, kind of free music. But the core of the music is embedded in all those other styles of music as well. So when I would hear stuff like that, like jazz is the least popular music, it would make me feel like, well, there's something going on in society where people aren't really searching for freedom and expression.
And how important for you was the collaboration with Kendrick Lamar?
It was important. I mean, that record in general was just important for the world, I think. I think that Kendrick, what he did with *To Pimp a Butterfly, he really showed people, I mean, like, being in that position of being like one of the most popular artists in the world and putting out a record that is so expressive and is so dense and lush, in a time period where like he's coming out of an era where like this notion that if you're going to make music that is going to be popular, it has to fit in this very little small box, and it can't go anywhere outside of it. And he just made a record that was completely outside of the box and was so popular, and it touched so many people. So it was big for me to be a part of it, and I think it was just big for the world and music and people and humanity to do that, you know.
And important that it was popular and very political.
Yeah, very political and very very real. You know, it was an album that was about artistry, you know, and that's not very common.
How important would you say politics is to your music?
Well, I mean, to me, music in general is an expression of who you are, and so politics affect all of us. You know, the policies that govern our societies are, whether you like it or not, important. You know, so I think music has a place in that. Like I said before, music kind of brings people together, and so what's a society? A group of people that are together. You know, so to have like a separation between music and politics, it doesn't really make sense to me. And you know, as a musician, we have in a unique position that we have a voice to people, and we can kind of express our understandings to those people and express the things that we learn from people and share knowledge and information.
Do you feel that as a duty almost, or just a natural thing that you would do?
I think it's the duty of everyone. You know, like I feel like the idea that we all are responsible for this world and what it is. So no matter what you do, so if you're a musician, if you're a mechanic, if you're an artist, if you're a, you know, cook, we all have that responsibility. And so, but different jobs allow you to have more reach than other ones. So I feel like, just like anyone else, I have a responsibility to contribute to what our society is.
You've been described as the jazz voice of the Black Lives Matter campaign. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I get that. I mean, you know, Black Lives Matter is something that is a reality that has been there since before that catchphrase is kind of, or that slogan, or that movement, I guess. That movement was already moving before it started moving. And so for me, you know, growing up, I mean, people don't always understand this idea of like what it means to have your society kind of tell you that it's okay for someone to wrongfully take your life. And that's the big part of it. It's people kind of get hung up on like, was it a murder or was it not a murder? But the reality is that that's not really the argument. It's when you know it's a murder, when you see it, it's on the camera, you can see a person taking someone's life unjustly, and when you say, that's not a crime. Well, what does that do to you? You know, like I always take it outside of like race, because people have all these misconceptions with that. But if it was like a police officer saw a guy that was, you know, not 6 feet tall, and because he's not 6 feet tall, he assumed he was dangerous and took his life. And if somehow a jury came to a conclusion that that's legitimate, like he had a legitimate reason to be afraid of that guy, he wasn't 6 feet tall, all the people under 6 feet tall would be like, that's crazy, that's madness, you can't just, you know. And so that continuous idea of something I grew up with as a kid, that to be afraid of the people that are supposed to be there to protect you, like you need to be afraid of the police. It's like, that's wrong.
But also perhaps that your life didn't have as much value as somebody else's.
But that's, why do I need to be afraid of the police? You know, what does that say about our society? What is your society telling you about who you are if you need to be afraid of the police as a 10-year-old kid? And so my music is a reflection of that life that I've lived. So like when people say, oh, you're the jazz voice of Black Lives Matter, I would say that any black man that makes jazz is the jazz voice of Black Lives Matter.
And what do you think music can do to tackle You know, what is now a really fundamental issue in America. As you say, it has been for a long time.
It's a fundamental issue of the world. And what it does, music does, is it connects people. And I think one of the most powerful tools that music has is it creates empathy. You know, it's hard to hate someone that you love. You know, so when someone, it's like, you go to a record store and you're flipping through the records and you see someone and they're like looking at a John Coltrane album and you see them looking at it and they're like, oh yeah. I can kind of make certain assumptions about your opinion of the world. You know, I wouldn't expect you to then turn around and pull out your swastika. You know what I mean? It's like there's a certain level of understanding that is transferred from one person to another through music. And so it creates a connection amongst people. Like we have these borders and we have these nations and countries that we think define us and separate us, but they don't. Like we're really all one people.
It's a very optimistic message when, as you say yourself, for black people living in America, it can be a very negative experience.
Oh, I mean, it can be a negative experience for any person living anywhere in the world. You know, I mean, America is where I'm from, so that's my experience. But as I've gone around the world, I've heard that same experience other places, and so it's an issue that is. It's not like an issue that, like I said before, it's more of a mentality issue that if you're willing to allow someone to be discriminated against or even killed because of the color of their skin, like if you allow that mentality to exist, then who's really safe? What if that mentality switches from the color of your skin to the color of your hair or your eyes or how tall you are or short you are? Do you have a beard? You know, that mentality of taking a person's life wrongfully it's an issue that everyone should be concerned with, because as history has shown us, that type of discrimination isn't limited.
Do you feel optimistic about what's happening in America?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing in that, like, I feel like on one side of things, we're really spiraling down. You know, we have a crazy president and he has millions of followers. But then on the flip side, people I feel like are less and less tolerant of that mentality. So there's more people who want to make the world a beautiful place than there are people who want to make it a bad place. There's significantly more from my vantage point. But the part of it that's kind of discouraging is that it feels like those who want to kind of drag us down are pulling much harder than the rest of us. But if at any point the rest of us decide to really push us up, pull it up, bring our society, bring our global and our, the United States being in the middle of that, to pull that up, it would go up, So
would you like to see people take a more active role politically on the ground?
Well, that's the only way the world's going to change. It doesn't change from the top up. The world changes as the masses change. And so if you're waiting for this person who's greatly benefiting from the world being the way it is, who got to where they are with the world being the way it is, to change it, you might be waiting for a little while. But if we each just did, as I said before, we each have our own role. And maybe your role is not the same as LeBron James or Beyonce, something like that. But can you make a difference on your block? Can you help your neighbor? Can you help the kids at your local elementary school? If the masses took this approach of I want to make the world a beautiful place, it will start to become that.
Do you feel optimistic about the future? I
am. Because like I said, in my travels, I meet so many people who want the world to be a beautiful place. And I feel so much positive energy that I feel like we don't really need violence because we have the numbers are so skewed in the other direction. It's only in our silence and our complacency that violence becomes an issue. It's if our society didn't accept, Because even like in the case of the police officers, okay, a police officer takes someone's life and he goes to court. He gets off not because of the police officer, he gets off because of those 12 citizens who are on the jury who say, it's okay. But that's the society, that's not, and as it becomes not okay, then that problem will cease to exist.
So the beautiful people you talk about need to make more noise.
Exactly. So much more noise, and it's not going out and hurting someone. That's just going to perpetuate something else. And it's not like necessarily that the good people are better at hurting people than the bad people are. If there's anything, it's the reverse. But it's more the acceptance of it is what I'm talking about. And I don't really claim to know exactly how to push forward this idea that we're not accepting it, other than to persist.
And your music plays a part in that, you hope?
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of expressing my thoughts, which is all I can really do, with the music at least.
Kamasi Washington, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thank you.